Let's look at one more example. I'm going to call this component friends component. Let's examine its UI. At the top, we have a header with the text add friend, and below that we have a label with the text full name, and beside that we have a text box, and then we have a button below them with the label add, and then below that we have a header again with the text Tom Sawyer's friends, and below that we have a list of names. So the expected functionality is that if the user enters a name into this text box and clicks on this add button over here, we need to take that name and add it to the list over here. Initially, this list will be empty, and as the user adds names and clicks on the add button, this list will start to fill up. So let's implement our friends component now. I'm going to add a new file called friends.js. So I'm going to type friends.js. That is going to be a function component. So let us write function friends, and we have to return some JSX. So let's write our return statement. Let's specify div as our root tag this time. And just like we did for the previous examples, let's try this 3-step strategy to write our state related code. And like we have seen, the first step is to write JSX for our UI and then identify things that need to change. So first, let us write JSX for our UI. At the top, we have a header with the text add friend. So let's add that first. Let's use h2, and I'm going to write add friend. Then we have a label with the text full name, and beside that we have a text box. Let's add them also. So I'm going to write label, and the text is full name. So let's write full name, and beside that there is a text box. So let's write input and close the tag, and below them we have an add button. So let's add that also. So I'm going to use a break tag. So I'm going to write button, and I'm going to give the label as add. Next, let us add a line below the add button. So I'm going to write HR, and I'm going to close the tag. So let's add that. And now we have to write JSX for this part. Let's use a separate div to hold that content. And so within this div, we have to add a header with the text Tom Sawyer's friends. So let's add that. H2 Tom Sawyer's friends. And below that we have a list of names. Let's assume we have a list of 2 items. That means an array of 2 items already with us. So if we have such an array, we can use the map function to process each element of this array and to return a new array. So let's do that. The first argument will give us the element of the array. So let us use item as the variable name, and in the function body let's write li, and let's embed item within those li tags. We want this code to be evaluated and then embedded within these ol tags. So this code also should have curly braces around it. So let's add them. So I'm going to place an opening curly brace, and I'm also going to place a closing curly brace. Let's export this component and look at the output. So I'm going to write export default friends, and let's open app.js. Let's comment out the code for the previous examples, and I'm going to write friends over here. VS Code did not add an import statement for us, so let's add that. Import friends from, and within single quotes dot to indicate the current directory / components / useState examples / friends, and close single quotes. Let's take a look at the output, and as you can see, we have implemented the UI given in the wireframe over here. The styling is a bit off for this list. To make it a little better, let us left align the bottom part of our UI, and we have used a div to hold the content of the bottom part. So let's add some CSS to left align the contents of this div. So I'm going to write style equals, and let's specify the curly braces to indicate that this is an expression that needs to be evaluated, and within that we have to specify an object. So let's add the second pair of curly braces, and let's write text align, and let's write left, and let's look at the output. And as you can see, now the bottom part of our UI is left aligned. This looks slightly better. So let's continue with this. So basically we have implemented our UI by hard coding our list of friends. So we hard coded Huckleberry Finn and Becky Thatcher as our values within the array, and those are the values that are being displayed in the output as of now. So as per our 3-step strategy, we have written the JSX for our UI, and now we have to identify things that need to change in the UI. And we know that in this UI, this list will change depending on what the user adds, and that list is this array over here. So let's use a variable for that, and more specifically we'll have to make it a state variable. So let's use the variable name friends for that array, and friends will have to be a state variable. So let's declare that using useState. So at the top, let's write const friends comma set friends equals useState, and initially this list will be empty. So the initial value of friends needs to be an empty array. So we specified an empty array as the initial value. So we identified what needs to change, and in our case that is an array, and we created a state variable for that also. And now we need to do the third step, which is to write code to modify those state variables in event handlers. In our case, we have this button over here, and when this button is clicked, this list over here will change. That means the state variable that holds the array will change. So we need to modify our state variable within the event handler code of this add button over here. So let's do that. So this is our add button, and I'm going to write on click, and I'm going to specify handle add as the event handler. Now let's write code for this handle add event handler. So I'm going to write const handle add, and let us make it an arrow function, and let's open the curly braces to add our function body. Before we forget, let us import useState. So let's write import useState from React, and within our function body we need to modify the state variable friends. So let's write modify state variable friends, and the modification that we want to do is we want to take what the user types into this text box, and we want to add it to this list over here. I have the React developer tools open, and I also have the friends component selected, and you can see that there is a state hook and its current value is an empty array, and that state variable was created using this useState statement over here. So this is our friends array. So if the user types in Huckleberry Finn in the text box, then we want to take this value of Huckleberry Finn and add it to the friends array, which is a state variable. If we do that, then React will update the ordered list over here and show Huckleberry Finn over here. So to modify the state variable friends, we need to get hold of the value in the text box. So let's write another to do get hold of the value in the text box. So the first problem that we need to solve is we need to get hold of this string that the user has typed. And we have seen in previous examples that when user types into this text box, the onChange event is fired with each character that the user types. So let's use that. This is our text box. So let's write onChange equals, and let's specify handle full name change. And now let us write code for handle full name change. So let's write const handle full name change equals, let's make it an arrow function, and let's specify the curly braces. We know that the event handler will get a synthetic event. Let's use E for that. And we know that we can get hold of the current value of the text box by using e.target.value. Let us use a state variable to hold this value. So I'm going to create a state variable called full name. I'm going to write const full name comma set full name equals useState, and let us pass an empty string as the initial value. So now let us use full name and set full name. So now we want to put this e.target.value into the full name state variable, and the correct way to do that is to use the set full name method. So let's write set full name and then pass e.target.value as the argument. So this statement over here will update the full name state variable. So now we have written code for our text box. As the user types, the onChange event will fire, and that will trigger the handle full name change event handler. And within the handle full name change method, we are taking the current value of the text box and updating the full name state variable. So at any point, if we want to get a hold of the string that the user has typed, we have to read this full name variable. So this to do is done. Let's verify that quickly using the React developer tools. So let's go to the web page. Please keep an eye on the state variable over here. In the text box, I'm going to type Huckleberry Finn, and you can see that as I'm typing, the state variable is getting updated over here. So I'm going to continue typing Huckleberry Finn, and you can see that whatever I have typed in over here is the value of the state variable right now, and that value can be read from this full name variable over here. So we are done with this to do over here. So let's remove that. I'm going to replace that with a comment saying full name will have whatever the user has typed. And the next step is to modify the state variable friends. That means we have to take this value of Huckleberry Finn and append it to the array over here. So let's do that. So let's remove this to do statement. We want to modify the friends array. So we have to use the set friends method. So I'm going to type set friends, and the argument to set friend should be a new array that contains the items of the previous array and also full name. And we can use the spread operator to do that. So let's write square brackets. Let's spread the elements of the existing friends array like this, and let's append full name to the array. So now we have completed the third step also, which is to write code to modify the state variables. Let us take a look at the output now. I have reloaded the page, and I'm going to type Huckleberry Finn again, and our full name state variable has the value Huckleberry Finn as expected. Now I'm going to click on the add button, and you can see that the string Huckleberry Finn got added to this array over here. And you can also see over here that React has added Huckleberry Finn to the ordered list over here. Let us add a couple of more names. I'm going to remove Huckleberry Finn manually, and I'm going to add Becky Thatcher now. Continue to observe this array over here. So I'm going to click on add now, and you can see that Becky Thatcher got added to this array. And when Becky Thatcher was added to this array, React saw that and it updated this ordered list over here. Let's add one more name. I'm going to clear this value of Becky Thatcher manually. The next name I'll add is Benjamin Rogers, and I'm going to click on the add button now. And just like before, you can see that Benjamin Rogers got added to the array over here, and React has added the li item for Benjamin Rogers over here. Let me add one more name. Let me clear Benjamin Rogers manually by using the delete button. And now I have cleared that. Let me type Amy Lawrence, and now I'll click on the add button, and you can see that Amy Lawrence also got added to the list. So it looks like adding friends to this list over here is working fine. We are almost done with our example, but there are a couple of minor things we need to address. And the first is that the string Amy Lawrence that we typed over here has been successfully added to the list over here. So it would be nice if this text box got cleared after that. Otherwise, in order to add the next item, we have to manually clear this text and then write the new text. So before adding a new friend, I had to clear out the name of Amy Lawrence manually. So let me add Joe Harper, and let me click on the add button, and you can see the problem. Joe Harper got successfully added to the list of friends over here, but the text box still has Joe Harper within it. So let us try to clear this text box after the name is successfully added to the list over here. So let's do that. With respect to our text box over here, we already have a state variable that we are updating as the user types. So as the user types over here, we are updating the state variable over here. Let me type a few more characters here, ABC, and you can see that ABC appeared here in the state variable. So in effect, we are filling up the state variable when the user is typing over here in this text box. It would be nice if changes to this state variable get reflected in the text box over here. If that were to happen, we could modify the value of the state variable to make it an empty string, and that would end up clearing this text box over here. So that means this text box over here can then be controlled by using the state variable over here. So this is our input field, and what we want to do is we want to control its value using a state variable, and we already have a state variable which is keeping track of its value, so we can use that. So let's use full name over here. So let's type full name. So what we have essentially done here is we have converted our input text box into a controlled component. Let's take a quick look at the docs. The docs say that an input form element whose value is controlled by React is called a controlled component. And the docs also say that with a controlled component, the input's value is always driven by the React state, which is what we wrote over here. The input value is driven by the full name state variable over here, and hence we have used the concept of the controlled component over here. Since we have converted our text box into a controlled component, now we can modify the value of the controlled component by modifying the full name state variable. So let's do that. In the event handler for the add button, let's add one more line of code. We want to clear the text box here, so we have to update the full name state variable to be an empty string. And to update the full name state variable, we have to use the set full name method. So let's use set full name method over here. So let's write set full name and let's pass an empty string as the argument. And that should update the value of the full name state variable to an empty string. And since our text box is a control component which gets its value from this full name state variable, it should have the effect of clearing the text box. So let's see if that happens. I have reloaded the page and I'm going to type Huckleberry Finn over here, and I'm going to click on the add button. Let's see what happens. I have clicked on the add button now, and you can see that the text box got cleared. So when we clicked on the add button, within the event handler code, we have updated the state variable full name to be an empty string like this. And when that happened, React updated the text box's value to be an empty string as well. Let's add one more name, Becky Thatcher, and click on add, and you can see that now everything is working fine. So now we are done with the functionality of our component, but there's one pending issue I would like to discuss. Since we have used a list in our example over here, let us quickly discuss one point that is related to lists. If you go to console over here, you can see that there is a warning over here, and it says each child in a list should have a unique key prop. Let's quickly read that again. The warning says that each child in a list should have a unique key prop. Let's quickly take a look at the docs. The docs say that keys help React identify which items have changed, are added, or are removed. And the docs also say that the best way to pick a key is to use a string that uniquely identifies a list item among its siblings. So let's do that. This is the code that is generating the list of li items, and we are using the map function. The map function gives us index as the second parameter, so we can use that as the key. So let's use that. So I have modified the parameter list to include index as well, and I have placed opening and closing brackets around the parameters now, and we have to specify a key prop like this, and let's pass index as the value. And now let us see if the warning goes away. Let us go to the web page. Let us reload the page and let us add Huckleberry Finn again. Huckleberry Finn, and I'm going to click on add, and you can see that that warning has gone away. And now we are finally done with this example.